Let's just say for a minute that your mom sends you to the grocery store for Shasta and cigarettes. So you go to the store and maybe you smoke a doober on the way and you have like some serious time dilation. And when you get home, your mom's gone and a whole bunch of monkeys have burned down your house. That's where we find ourselves at the beginning of The Gentle Giants of Ganymede. One of the things I had said about the first book, Inherit the Stars, is that it has this very clean expository narrative. I had also mentioned that it deals with competent, well-meaning people working in good faith to solve a problem without any other external conflict other than the problem itself, other than the mystery. And I understand that that's the sort of thing that might turn people off to books, or to certain books, especially today. I think one of the things that we've seen in modern science fiction literature, and it's not just modern science fiction, but we see a lot in modern science fiction where every single thread has to be pulled, and every character has to have his own arc, and we have to follow out every single bit of detail that we can, and we have to rope in conflict from this human and that human and this situation and that situation. We have to thread them all together into this larger conflicted narrative. And that is not what you're going to find in these books. Even in The Gentle Giants of Ganymede, the narrative remains clean and expository, centered on the actions and the conversations of well-intentioned, competent scientists and aliens working together to solve a problem. It's optimistic, and it may be shamelessly uncynical. I think that one of the things that makes that narrative style work so well in these books is that the point, one of the larger points of the book, is about the nature of man versus the nature of this new alien species that's encountered. And one of the things that is vexing, without spoilers, one of the things that's vexing to the new alien species that encounters man is that they evolved without need for competition or aggressive tendency. The way that evolution took place on their planet, as it turns out, is that because of the high carbon atmosphere, a lot of the creatures had to develop a separate circulatory system that took the toxins that were removed from the bloodstream and kept them separate from the rest of the circulatory system. But this had the effect of making these creatures deadly to any other creatures that ate them. So because of the nature of the planet they evolved on, the creatures had to evolve intelligence faster. They had to evolve this biological system quicker, and it beat out the carnivores to the extent that the majority of the life that evolved on the planet evolved as herbivorous and lacking any kind of threat from carnivorous creatures. The sort of kink in all of this for the species is that because of the separate circulatory system, any small amount of damage would cause their deaths. So as the species evolved, they addressed these various traits at different points. All of that to say that you end up with a species that, when they conceptualize the way that civilization works, they cannot recognize the possibility that a civilization could be built by creatures with aggressive tendencies, by carnivores. herbivores or by omnivores like man. So when they run into man, it deepens the mystery for them. How did these aggressive apes come out to the stars? If you take this pickle the two groups find themselves in, one being a race that has a history of excessive violence, and one that has no history of violence whatsoever. And you put them together in a unified space of well-intentioned, competent people who are working in good faith. And it's remarkable how that bit of plotting fits with this very plain expository narrative. It just works. I would also like to address this. In the other video, I had mentioned that as a reader in the 21st century, it was difficult to read the first book because I just kept screaming at the book, just genetics, run a genetic analysis. And I had mentioned that at the time that it was written in the early 70s that, you know, we had basically just worked out the genetic model and we're just sort of peeking under the curtain a little bit. And most of that science, you know, wasn't even fully public at that point. By the time that Hogan got around to this one, there was a lot more genetic science out there and available clearly to him. I really wouldn't let the simple narrative style turn you off from reading these books. It's great candy. You know, it feels like to me from sort of Dune onward, there was this intense desire for writers to pick at every single little thread that they could pick at. So there were no minor characters. Every story arc had to be fleshed out and then integrated into the narrative as a whole. There was conflict coming from every direction. And it just is tiring sometimes. It gets really tiring. It feels like a tiring way to try to tell a story. And that's not to say that there aren't great examples of it. There are really great examples of it. But I don't think it's required for every story. And I think that there are a lot of modern science fiction writers that exist right now that are really trying to graft whatever inherent style that they have into that tendency. And I just don't think it's necessary. I don't think we need to know about every character. I don't think every character deserves to be completely fleshed out. And you run into that a lot in these books where, as a reader that's accustomed to that other style of narrative, you know, when he mentions the cook on the human starship that can beat everybody in chess, that's his deal. The way that it's set up in the story, you think, yeah, maybe that will become relevant again later. Maybe that's a story arc that is going to get fleshed out, and it doesn't, and it's great because really the story itself, the story of this one particular character, its only purpose was to make the environment that was being described just a little bit more alive and give it a little bit more flavor. There wasn't a need to know this character's backstory or to see him playing chess with the aliens or whatever thing sort of typically manifests itself in a modern narrative. Same thing with the people back on Earth. In sort of a modern science fiction narrative, you might have the sort of internal conflict of whatever crew is away from Earth, and then whatever's happening on Earth. And a lot of times there's a power struggle, and you know the people on Earth don't understand what the people out in space understand, but they still want them to do something unreasonable. And you know, we see this all the time. It's a modern science fiction trope. And while this book had space for that, it had room for that kind of narrative or that kind of conflict to occur, it just didn't happen. And And I think Hogan's intention was just to say, this doesn't have to happen. We can all work in good faith. We can all be competent, and we can all work together and be optimistic. And, you know, it's the antithesis of cynicism. And that's the best thing about this book. There's a book that comes after this one called Giant Star. I've already started reading it, but I'm honestly just kind of ready for something fresh. But I have this feeling that if I don't go ahead and read it, I probably won't come back to it. So I think I'll go ahead and round out these 3 books and kind of see where we go from there. Thanks for your time. Take it easy.